The art of listening. Welcome to today's segment. I am Dr. Natasha Oquendo. I want to thank you and welcome you. If this is your first time joining me, whether it is by the podcast Power to Prosper or whether you're on my YouTube channel at Dr. Natasha Oquendo, you are welcome. Listen, we are continuing in this particular segment or series, should I say, the power of belief. Now, let's get into it, the art of listening. When we talk about listening, it is definitely different than hearing, just hearing a thing. We're taught many things in life, but listening is not a topic that we are taught about. And that's just the truth of the matter. We talk effortlessly. We're taught about how to talk and form our words, even from babies on up to adolescents. We're being taught how to talk, and we're also given a lot of opportunities to talk. But listening must be intentional. Like I said, we were created, we have two ears and we have one mouth. So we're given a greater capacity to hear than we are to speak. Or should I say, we're given greater opportunities and more opportunities to hear a thing more so than to speak a thing. And so even the scriptures say this in James chapter 1, verse 19. It says, be quick to listen and slow to speak. So listening should be a quick thing, right? But speaking, we should be slow to speak, right? And just think about this now. And I want to look at statistic wise because we're given the ability to think quicker and more and listen quicker or more than we are. And it's faster than we are to speak, right? Speaking, we have 135 to 775 words per minute. So we have that ability to speak at the speed of 135 to 175 words per minute. But when it comes to listening or hearing, we have the capacity to hear per minute 400 to 800 words per minute. That is powerful. And so there is emphasis being put on hearing a thing and getting to the place of listening more so than talking. If you think about that, for many of us, for most of us, unless somebody is mute, then talking comes easily, no matter how it sounds or whatever. But listening, like I said, is intentional. So let's go a little deeper. So why is listening so important? Well, let's look at it. When we think about listening, statistic wise, when I looked into this, it says 85% of what we know came by way of listening. So 85% of what we know comes from listening, not just hearing it, but actually listening to it if we know it, right? And so let's look at the word listening. Let's look at the definition. What does it actually mean to listen? It says to give your attention to, right? When you're listening to something, this is not just you hearing it. If you hear it, you may not necessarily give your attention to it. So this goes a little deeper than just hearing, right? So the art of listening says I'm going to give my attention to what I'm hearing. That means I'm going to be attentive to what I'm hearing. I'm going to concentrate on hearing, on what I'm hearing. I'm going to tune into what I'm hearing. And it even says I'm going to hang on to the words, hang on to someone's words that I'm hearing, right? Another part of listening is to make an effort to hear something, meaning I'm going to actually put in the effort to hear this, right? To listen to this. It also says to be alert and ready to hear. Now, that is key. We are so in tune to, or so in the practice of hearing something while we're doing something else. So think about that. If 85% of what we know came by listening, then think about what we're actually getting in, what we're actually paying attention to. We've patterned our life to just really just hear something while we're doing other things, while we're busy doing other things. And so nothing wrong with that now if you are like on a treadmill or something like that, because I tend to listen to things when I'm on a treadmill. And I tell you, you can key in to take your mind off of that treadmill. And that's a whole nother story. You're gonna take your mind off every ache, every pain, every my foot hurt, my arch hurt. To take your mind off of it. So it's good to listen to things like that to take your attention away or your focus away from the pain or the discomfort and to put it on the substance of what's being said. Now, another thing concerning if you're listening, that means that you are taking notice of what you're hearing and to act on what someone says. So you take notice of it to the point that you're ready to act on it, right? To act on what has been said to you. Another way of listening is to respond to it, to respond to the advice or a request. So you're actually responding to it, right? You're taking heed of it. You're marking it. It means to mark what was said, right? To be mindful of, to watch what was said, to follow what's being said, to observe, right? To give thought to. This is a little deeper than just hearing it, right? To take it into consideration. Now that is another one. Meaning if I'm listening to something, then what I'm hearing, I'm actually to the place or to the point of taking it into consideration what I've heard, right? I'm hanging on to it. I'm accepting it. Now that is big. What is it that you're listening to that you've come to the place where you're accepting it? You're accepting it into your system, into your brain, and it's going through the process and getting to your heart. And we'll get there. What are you listening to the point you're paying attention to it so much so to you believe it? Because we're talking about the power of belief, right? So what am I listening to the point that I'm hearing it so much to the point that I actually believe it? Right? And then you go a step further in that listening. It says to obey. Am I willing to obey what I'm hearing? Right? And we're working to a place because we're dealing with our belief, right? Getting us to the place. And then I left this one for last, but it says to take to heart. And so I want to bring all this together, to take to heart. So let's look at that word heart. I have the heart connection. Let's look at the word heart because when you look at the word ear, it's EAR. Then you look at the word hear, HEAR. Then you look at the word heart, HEART, right? You have the word in heart, you have ear, you have hear, and then you have art in that, right? In that word heart. So all of this is connected. The ear, hearing, and then listening is another dimension of hearing. And I believe the listening is what leads to the heart. So let me kind of explain it. We're talking about the art of listening, and I want to go a little deeper because it's deeper than just hearing a thing, right? You have your ear, and I believe your ear, the ear canal to your brain, I call that the hearing, right? From your ear to your brain is hearing. Now, once a thing gets into your brain, it goes through a whole process of its own, right? It's going to go into that ear canal and go through that limbic brain and through that neocortex brain. And the limbic brain, and I talked about this in the previous segment, is the emotional side of things, right? And it is the most dominant side of the brain, the emotional side. That's your what feels good, what feels bad, what feels right, what feels wrong. It's all about the feelings and the emotions, right? And then you have the neocortex side of your brain, and that is the reasoning side of your brain. What is rational, right? What makes sense? What is rational? And so the dominant side is the limbic side, which is the emotional. And that is the side that the information has to go into to get to the heart. Does it feel right? Because the heart is dealing with the emotional. What are you passionate about? What do you care about? What are you concerned about, right? What is heartfelt? And so it's going through this process. So think about this. Now, I believe from the brain to the heart, is how you transfer from hearing into listening, because now it's getting down in your heart. So from your ear to your brain, you're hearing, and you're hearing to the point of coming to believe, depending on how much you hear it, right? Because you're going to have to hear it more than once to believe it, unless you already have that in your brain to believe, right? Unless it's confirmation, right? But something new, it's going to have to be listened to and heard many times before you can just accept it. But anyway, from your ear to your brain, you're hearing a thing, and that's where you're trying to develop that belief as it's going through the process of your brain. Are you accepting it? Right? Do you believe it? Are you mindful of it? Are you willing to obey what is being requested? All of that is going through the brain, the process of the brain, right? Now, from the brain to the heart is how you listen. And I tend to believe that's where your faith is developed, from that brain to the heart, when information is coming in, meaning it have made it, survived through the process of your brain, and you're willing to accept it and believe it, so much so that it have entered your heart. And that is, now you've made a passageway to keep hearing that thing and keep hearing that thing till you're listening, and it is actually causing your heart to feel a certain way about it. Right? So in order for a belief to get into your heart, you would have to practice listening in repetition, meaning the power of repetition over and over and over. In order for that belief to get down into your heart, you're going to have to practice listening. And so let's look at this scientifically. Scientifically, it says it takes the average person 2 to 7 times to hear the same message before they take action. Now, science has proven this. So the average person has to hear the same thing 2 to 7 times before they take action on it. And so you're listening to something repetitiously until you comprehend it enough to correctly execute what you've learned, right? So what you have received, in order to execute it correctly, you have to listen to it repetitiously. Now, I want to kind of give a little bit of biblical concept or biblical principle to solidify what is being said in this particular segment. Now, and this is why the Bible says this: faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So even God requires us to repetitiously hear in order to develop faith, so that we can develop the skill of listening, right? He say, how will they hear unless a preacher is sent? And so that's why you may hear preachers and different speakers, if you have pastors or hear people speaking, whether it's personal development, whether it's about wealth, or whether it's about, different things, mindset work and all of that. You're hearing some of the same things articulated, maybe slightly different. Why? So that you can develop the skillfulness or develop the art of listening. Because until you listen, will a thing get in your heart and you can carry it out or function in it, if that makes sense. And so let me give you an example biblically that came to me biblically to help us understand this. You had the prophet Samuel. And Samuel was a very powerful prophet in his day. But in the beginning stages, he listened to his priest, Eli, the high priest, Eli. And while he was listening to Eli, it came to a time where God began to try to speak to the prophet Samuel. And so when the Lord spoke to him, the Lord's voice sounded like Eli. And so Samuel got up and he ran in there and he said, "Did you call me?" And Eli said, "No, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." And so he went back to go to sleep again. And then he heard the voice and he got up again a second time. "Well, did you call me?" And he said, "No, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." And so he came in again and he heard the voice. He said, "Did you call me?" He said, I heard you. You called me. He said, "I didn't call you." Then Eli quickened in his spirit. He said, Next time he said, I didn't call you. He said, the Lord is calling you. The Lord is speaking to you. He said, so this time, if you hear him say it again, say, it is your servant, Lord. I am listening, right? I'm listening. Are you hearing that? And so he developed that through the art of listening. Why? He was listening to Eli, the priest Eli, speak God's word or speak in different things. And it was getting his ear exercised, his hearing, to get to the place where he would listen. And then the next thing you know, God was able, he developed the art of listening, and then God was able to speak to him directly. Right? Now, and I'm saying this because maybe someone is listening to this, right? And we're talking about the art of listening, and you may be saying, well, I can't hear from God. I can't hear from God. I want to hear God's voice. Or maybe you desire to hear God's voice, and maybe you're expecting God to show up a certain way or have this audible voice with you, or whatever the case. So you don't, and I'm here to tell you, you don't have a I can't hear from God problem. You have an I haven't listened to the word preached enough to hear him problem, right? That is it. Eli was speaking, and the prophet Samuel went from just hearing to listening. Now, let me kind of go into this just a little bit further. So what are you getting past when you're listening? Just think about, there's a speaker, and you may be in a personal development, or maybe you're even listening to this. Depending upon the things that your brain already have heard, right? And I talked about this. So here it is, information coming, just like I'm giving you this information now. Information is coming, it's going through your hearing, then it's getting to your brain and going through this process. So now it has the new words that you are hearing, the fresh words that you're hearing is having to fight past different mindsets that are already living in your brain and in your thought pattern. Meaning, well, is this true? Or what are they talking about? That's not real. That's false. It depending what's already living there. It has to get past your confirmation bias. It has to get past what you want to hear, or what you think you should be hearing. It has to get past you being distracted, right? Because a lot of times when we're hearing something, we're not hearing it in its entirety, right? And I'm going to kind of hit that in a minute. But it has to get past all these different things that are going on in your mind. Distractions, things you're thinking about. Well, I got to do this, I got to do that. And people are talking, they're speaking, but a lot of it is getting past you because your mind is distracted on different things. So you really haven't learned how to focus in or hone in on the speaker or hone in on the substance that is being said. Now, and I talked about this, right? Even concerning listening to God's word. All right. And I used the prophet Eli and hearing from God, and the prophet Samuel and him listening to the high priest Eli, right? And then getting to the place or graduating through the skill of listening, through the art of listening, to the place where he was able to hear God based on his calling. And I'm talking about the prophet Samuel. God was going to use him to speak on his behalf to some capacity. So he had to come subject to a time of developing the skill or the art of listening. Now, why was he listening? Because the words needed to get past just him hearing and get past his brain and become a feel-good mechanism to his limbic brain, because that's the most dominant side, how it feels. How it feels does it feel right? Does it feel wrong? Does it feel good? Does it feel bad? Right? So it had to get to that place to where his heart, as he listened, it got down into his heart. Right? And so why did it have to get there? When I talk about scripturally, or when I talk about the word, because that is what God responds to, the heart. Right? I think it was David. He said, your word have I hidden in my heart that I would not sin against thee. So that is the whole point of developing the art of listening, so you could get to the place to where things are heartfelt. Words are in your heart. They're heartfelt, right? And that is causing you to learn, and that is causing you to be open for growth. It is adding on to you, right? And so if it's hard for you to learn, or if you're a hard learner and you can't really retain stuff and all of that, you might have to look at how you listen, right? And so let's get into this part. Listening influences. What influences your listening? Well, what listening influences? It influences your attention. And so kind of pay attention to your awareness of things when they're being said to you. Your attention span. We are in a time where things like TikTok and Reels, and different things like that, and shorts. Most of us, that's all we have the attention span for. And so, what are we really learning? If it's only a minute and a half, 90 seconds. Some of them have graduated to 3 minutes, but it just depends, right? And in that 3 minutes, what type of substance is coming out? What am I actually getting? Is it something that is feeding my brain enough so to get to my heart? Am I listening to the right things? What gets my attention, right? What causes you to really listen? And you have to pay attention to that. You have to have an awareness of what gets your attention. Is it drama? Does drama get your attention? Of course, a lot of us are in tune. Soon as something, some gossip or some drama comes, does that get your attention? Does that cause you to listen word for word to see what is going on, even with the news, with things going on in the lives of famous people and all of that? Does that get your attention? The Hollywood gossip, does that get your attention and cause you to listen more? Because there is something, when you listen to those things, that is what you're going to be aware of. That is what is going to grab your attention. So kind of pay attention to what gets your attention when it comes to listening. What influences you to listen, right? Another thing is comprehension, which is your ability to understand. Are you able to correctly understand what you're listening to? That is a thing. When you hear a thing, first off, you may not quite understand it the way it is intended to be delivered to you. And so you have to listen to a thing deeply. You have to get into a deep place of listening to where when you hear it and then you get to the place of correctly understanding what you heard, that is your comprehension. That is what listening does. It influences you to comprehend well, right? Another thing is interpretation. What does it mean to you? When you hear a thing and then you're listening to a thing, what does it actually mean? How are you interpreting it? Are you interpreting everything that you hear from a negative standpoint? Then that means that there is something in your brain, in the limbic part of your brain that is stuck there emotionally that leans more towards negative things. And so when you hear words or you hear things that are said, your brain processes everything from that negative standpoint, right? And so that means there needs to be some work because there's no balance, right? Of course, you're going to hear some bad things, but how you interpret it means everything. Because a lot of things may be sent that had no negative intention or had no bad intention, right? Now, another aspect of that listening, what it influences is your retention, meaning keeping a thing that you hear in your memory bank, right? That is a part of your limbic system, limbic brain as well, that limbic brain, your memory. How well do you retain information that you're hearing, right? And what do you retain, right? Are you able to, is your memory bank full of the negative experiences in your life and you can quote them verbatim the way they happened and it's been decades ago, right? Then you need to get your limbic brain in tune to some good things because there's not a balance. Everything will be filtered from that negative place, but you have to learn to listen, right? And so this is why you hear things. This is where the power of repetition comes in because it may be something that is good substance for you to receive into your heart and to cause action in your life, but your brain is not processing it or getting the attention or comprehending or interpreting it right, or you're not retaining it, right? So that is the power of repetition. So how do you continue to possess that information? Are you retaining it? How do you use it or put it into action when you're getting it? Right? And so let's look at this statistically again. Immediately after a conversation, suppose you had a conversation, and immediately after that conversation, statistically, it says that we only retain about 50% of what was said in that conversation immediately after. If you're listening, only about 50% of that conversation sticks. Now, 48 hours after, right? 2 days after, if you revisit what was said in that same conversation, it drops down to 25%. So now 2 days later, you're only retaining 25% of the conversation. So that is the reason why you have to hear something more than one time. You have to hear it in repetition. If it's faith that you're after, you have to hear God's word in repetition over and over and over again. Why? Because you're losing what you retained as the days go by, right? Listen, and let me give another scripture. In Luke 8:18, it says this: consider carefully how you listen. This is scripture. Whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what they think they have, will be taken away from them. Now listen to that. So he's saying to be careful how you listen, determining on the quality of your listening, right? Because if you listen well, then what you already have, you're going to have more. It's going to add on to you. But if you don't listen well or haven't learned to listen well, then what could be very well substance to add on to you, what you think you got, it'll be taken away from you, right? So how you listen determines whether you experience loss or increase. I want somebody to hear me. How well you learn to listen, especially when it comes to substance, right? Especially how you hear a thing, learning how you listen. It determines whether you're going to experience a loss or increase in what you've heard. Okay, let me give you an example. Let me put a balance there. If you're hearing a bunch of negativity, right? And how you listen to it. Now you've gotten to the place where you are actually listening. You're in tune. It has your attention. That determines whether you experience an increase in negativity in your own life or a loss of negativity. Maybe you're somebody that is not in tune with the negativity. Maybe you're in tune with good things that are substance for your growth, right? And how you listen to that, how you receive it, how it gets your attention, how you accept it, how it becomes heartfelt to you, determines if you experience an increase in what you've heard. Now, let me give you another verse. Mark 4:24. It says, pay attention to what you hear or what you listen to. The measure you give will be the measure you receive, but you will receive even more. Ooh, now I want you to hear this. So let's look at an example, right? Let's kind of look at this. So whether it's positive information, what it's saying, be careful what you listen to, right? What? This is the what. The last verse was how. Be careful what you're listening to, what you're getting into. Because if you're receptive, or if your brain is more in tune to letting the negativity get in your ear and you start listening and it gets down to your heart, right? Whatever that information may be, whatever your perspective or your interpretation is what comes back to you with extra. Oh, I want you to get that. So if you're listening to good things, positive things, things that are to help build you, things that are to give you substance, right? Then it is saying, if you're listening to that, the measure of that, however much of that you're listening to, that's the measure you're going to receive, and even more than that. Oh, goodness. So you're going to receive what you give your ear to, and even more than that, whether that's positivity or negativity, right? Whether that's gossip or whether that's stuff for personal growth and development, right? Personal growth and development. So you're going to develop, you're going to grow and to develop based upon what you're hearing and how much of it you're hearing and listening to it, to the point that it is getting into your heart to ignite you into action. Ugh. So let's look at this. I thought this was interesting. There is a 7-38-55% rule. The 7-38-55% rule. So it's saying 55% when somebody is speaking, right? The majority of us, 55% of us are paying attention to the body language and the facial expressions. So 55% of us, when we're hearing something and listening to something, we focus in and give our focus and pay attention to the facial expressions and the body language. So we're paying attention to the outward appearance of a thing, right? Then it goes on to say that 38% of us, when we're listening to something, when we're keyed in, something has our attention, then it says that we're paying attention to tone, right? The tone of a thing. That's when you get people, well, it's not what they said, it's the way they said it. Well, what they said was right, but it's the way they said it. It was the tone. I didn't like the tone. And so the brain spits it out, but it may very well be good, accurate information to add value to your personal growth and your personal development, right? For you to go to the next level in your life. It may be what you need to hear that is going to take you to the next level in life, but you're going to have to hear it 2 to 7 times. And you think about it. Listening is a choice. You choose what you put your focus, what you decide to listen to, right? Hearing stuff 1 or 2 times, you may not can control that. Like you hear an alarm or you hear, somebody said this, somebody said that. And you can choose whether you want to hear it again. And you definitely decide whether you put your full attention to listen to it, right? Based on how it made you feel. See, and think about that, body language, 55% body language and facial expressions. This is the outward appearance of a thing. So you're looking at how it looks, how they're dressed, how, all of this. So you have to get past all of that. Oh, they sharp. Oh, I'm telling you that's raw right there. Oh, that looks good. You have to get past all these things in your mind in order to get to the place of substance. That's why you have to keep listening until you learn to focus, because here is the 7%. And I tend to believe that I am a 7%er. And I hope that you develop, once you hear this, into a 7% person. Why am I saying that? These people, the 7% is verbal. Meaning they are hearing the substance or the value in what is actually being said, regardless of the body language and facial expressions or how it's packaged, or regardless of the tone, right? That's why you have people, let me give you an example. People who are caught up with tone. Maybe some people need to hear it fiery and intense, and that is what you see what that does. That stimulates an energy, that stimulates something to give them that energy, and that's what they're looking for. And they still haven't truly embraced listening, because they're looking at the energy, they're looking at the facial expressions, they're looking at the attitude, they're looking at how they're dressed, the outward appearance. And if you look around, especially some of us who are in the church, well, appearances mean nothing. People people fall and different things like that. And so it throws us off. Some of us are caught up with tone. Oh, well, they're too aggressive. Where, oh, I want to hear somebody who's speaking real soft and real serene and all of these different things. Well, once you get past all of that, what is actually being said? Is it adding substance and value to your life? Is it challenging you to change your mindset and your perspective so that you can grow? Right? Because if you're stuck in life, that is because you need to listen to something to get your brain and your paradigm to shift so that you can grow. Oh, goodness. So that means when something comes to grow you or to challenge you or to transform you or to take you to a higher level in life, business, ministry, whatever it is, then it's going to shake up that limbic brain a little bit. It's going to throw off your psyche just a little bit. Why? Because the waves, the tracks that are already in your brain, they are already set. And so it's going to have to change the way your brain sees it and your perspective so you can allow it in and listen and for it to get to your heart. And once it becomes a heart thing, that's how you're able to put motion to it, right? And so we're leading to a time, and this is prophetic right here when I say this. We are headed into a time, and I can kind of see it. We're headed into a time where we're going to start paying close attention to the substance. Many of us are going to start leaning towards the 7%, right? Many of us are going to come away from the tone. We're going to come away and we're going to get into from the body language and facial expressions and really get into the substance, the meat of what's being said. What's going to bring value? What's going to help me grow? What's going to help me think different so I can do better, so I can produce more, so I can go higher, right? And so look at this. What is poor listening skills and not listening at all? What does that do? Now, and when I saw this, I was blown away. Poor listening skills or not listening and being indifferent and not caring what somebody's saying or whatever, and it may be good for you. And I'm talking about the stuff that's substance and that's good for you. When you look past the package and look past the tone and really get to the substance or the meat and the bread and what is being said, right? But poor listening and not listening leads to 70% of misunderstandings, 70% of errors, like getting it wrong or making an error or misunderstanding what somebody's saying. And it leads to 70% of arguments. 70% of arguments is because of poor listening or not listening at all. Damaged relationships is the outcome of poor listening skills or not listening at all, or your brain being so in tune to negativity, to everything that somebody says, you take it from a negative space because this person said this to me years ago and it damaged you. And so now you're having arguments and kind of look at this. Maybe this is something you're experiencing. And I'm just decreeing and declaring that as you hear this today, that you will become aware, that it will strike your awareness, that it will strike your brain when you hear it and cause you to listen. And you may have to go back and listen to this again and again and again until it opens up the way so you can come out of that place of misunderstandings and errors and arguments and damage, a trail of damaged relationships and being hindered in your advancement. Because if you have a poor listening, it's hard to advance. You can't advance beyond your level of listening, right? And that's in no subject and no topic, right? That's in life, that's in relationships, that's in business, that's in ministry, that's in all of that. If you don't develop the art of listening, That's why everyone that comes into the success lab at the basic level, I have different things with substance for them to develop the art of listening. But if your mind is, I'm ready to get to this, I'm ready to get to that part. Well, guess what? If we were ready to get to those parts, we would already be operating in those parts. There is something that we have not heard enough of to graduate to where we really want to be. Whew. I want somebody to hear that. And so not only is it hindering our promotions and hindering our advancements, but it's also causing us to miss opportunities. We may be missing opportunities because we have not heard or digested or listened to enough substance, right, to sustain us for the opportunities that we desire. Ugh. So I want us to get this because accurate listening is very vital. It is very important. When you listen accurately, it enhances your ability to understand, right? It makes you a more better communicator. When you listen, you cannot speak beyond your grade of listening, right? You can't communicate powerfully beyond your grade of listening. This is spiritual and everything, y'all. This is even the prophetic, right? He said that you have to prophesy according to your proportion of faith. So what you speak out of your mouth prophetically will not exceed what gets down into your heart through the art of listening. Ugh. I want somebody to hear that, right? And so when you're accurately listening, right, you become a skillful listener, and then you accelerate into a powerful learner, right? You don't learn beyond how you listen. You listen well, you learn well, right? You listen well, you communicate well. Meaning when you communicate, it's effective. People are able to understand you. You're able to articulate what you really mean. Now, if people are always misunderstanding you, that means you have to learn to listen. Ooh. Right? Meaning if you're articulating it well, and what you are really meaning in your heart is coming out of you. And people are really understanding and grasping it, and vice versa. If you're listening and it's always you getting thrown off and you misunderstanding and it's always triggering you, and things like that, then that has to do with listening too, right? Another point I want to make. How accurately you listen determines how effective you become. Meaning, and let me give you an example. Maybe you're taking a course to become a real estate agent. How accurately you listen to that information determines how effective of a realtor you become. Now, put that in any area. How accurately you listen to your mate determines how effective you will be in your marriage. So if you're having a lot of misunderstandings in your relationship, that is because both parties have not grasped the art of listening. Listening to understand. Listening to learn. Right? Listening to comprehend accurately what is being said. Because now you have to check the reason you're listening. Right? Sometimes we listen to find fault. And so if you're getting new information, you have to learn the art of listening to get past trying to find error. And listen, because see, you can listen. Let me tell you something. And this is something that I learned. Even if somebody, we're on this thing about deception, even if somebody is saying things and it is deceptive, if I listen well enough, I'm going to hear a lot of truth, because you can't deceive somebody unless there's some truth involved. And so if I learn the art of listening, then I learn how to decipher truth from the lie. Right? And so maybe this person is saying a lot of good truth, and I can grab a hold to the truth and expel the lie. Oh, see, this is when you learn the art of listening, right? Because it's difficult to speak and it's difficult to communicate or perform beyond your capacity to listen. I'm going to say that again. It's difficult to speak or communicate or perform beyond your capacity to listen. And so I want you to understand, if we are going to develop into these emotionally intelligent people, because that is a going thing, emotional intelligence, then it is crucial that we embrace the art of listening. Thank you for joining me. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Listen, this may be one for the books. Play it back. It's going to be under the playlist, The Power of Belief. And I'm Dr. Natasha Oquendo. And listen, thank you for joining me. Go ahead and join my podcast. If you haven't, download the podcast. And also subscribe to me on my YouTube channel. This has been the art of listening. Woo. We want more. We want growth. We want personal development. And even if you want to grow in your faith in God, this is a skill that you have the power, you have the choice. And those who choose to develop the art of listening are those who will excel. Be blessed.